Help! He's not breathing! The scream tore through the silence of first class like a cold blade slashing across silk. From the ivory leather seats and crystal glasses glimmering under soft cabin lights, everything froze. A plane that had only known the steady hum of engines and the clink of cutlery suddenly became a stage of chaos. The voice belonged to Margaret Lewis, 50-8, her eyes wide, her trembling hands pressed against her husband's chest. Right before her, Richard Lewis, 60-4, a wealthy businessman who had once signed billion-dollar deals with unshakable calm, now lay helpless, like a child dragged under by a current. His face drained of color, his lips shifting from pink to blue. A champagne flute slipped from the table, shattering on the carpet, shards scattering like frozen tears. Margaret's sobs broke the air. She had watched him intimidate rivals with nothing but composure. Yet now, those once powerful hands clawed weakly, as though grasping for an invisible thread to keep him tethered to life. "Please, somebody help him!" Her plea echoed through the cabin. Heads turned, laptops closed, magazines dropped. Passengers glanced at one another, confused, shocked, and then panicked. A few rose but faltered, paralyzed by fear. First class, built to be a sanctuary, had become the witness to a fight against death itself. Richard's body slumped, heavy, sliding off the seat and collapsing onto the carpet. Margaret dropped to her knees, shaking his shoulders desperately. "Richard, stay with me. Don't leave me." But his eyes rolled back. His breath came in ragged bursts, faltering like an engine running on fumes. Death's cold hand had reached into the cabin, brushing against them all. No one moved. The silence stretched like an eternity of helplessness. Then from seat 4A, a voice rang out, not loud, not shaken, but clear and resolute. "I'm a doctor. Let me through." It was Dr. Nathan Carter, 40. He wore no white coat, only a simple dark blue shirt and a grey jacket. To most, he looked like any ordinary passenger, perhaps a corporate employee. But just hours earlier, he had stood on stage at the International Cardiology Conference in Atlanta, his colleagues rising to applaud research that had saved thousands of lives. Nathan didn't wait for permission. He unbuckled his seatbelt, reached for his medical kit from the overhead bin, and moved quickly forward. To him, there were no leather seats, no cabin lights, no divisions. There was only a man slipping into death. "Step aside, please. Time is critical," Nathan said, his voice calm yet commanding. But a hand shot out, blocking his way. Karen Whitfield, 52, the senior flight attendant. Her blonde hair was tightly pinned, her uniform immaculate, her face hardened by 2 decades in the air. Her eyes were sharp, her voice firm. "Sir, return to your seat. We will handle this." Nathan stopped, locking eyes with her. He found no cooperation, only suspicion. A suspicion he had lived with his entire life. "I'm a cardiologist. That man is in cardiac arrest. He has less than 4 minutes before irreversible brain damage," Nathan pressed, his words deliberate, his tone cutting through the cabin. Karen did not budge. Her reply was edged with steel. "Anyone can claim to be a doctor. We follow procedure. Sit down." The cabin froze. On one side lay a dying man, on the other, the only one who could save him, denied by the very rules meant to keep people safe. Margaret sobbed, crying out, "Please let him help. He's dying." But Karen stood her ground, her hand firm against Nathan's chest. In her eyes, he didn't look like a doctor. He didn't fit the image she trusted. No white coat, no silver hair, no aura of authority. Nathan tightened his grip on the medical kit. Memories flickered, being stopped at hospital entrances because no one believed he was a physician. The skeptical stares in emergency rooms, the insulting question, "Are you the nurse?" He was used to being underestimated, but this time was different. A man was dying in front of him. "Ma'am," Nathan said, his voice low, his eyes drilling into hers. "My name is Dr. Nathan Carter, Chief of Cardiology at San Francisco General. Step aside, or you will be responsible for a man's death." The air thickened. Karen stiffened, her lips trembling, though she still didn't move. Some passengers whispered, "She's right. What if he's lying?" Then a woman's voice broke through. "He's not lying. I'm a trauma nurse. I can tell he's the real deal." All eyes turned. Nathan stood firm, tall, unyielding. Karen, long used to giving orders, suddenly felt the ground shifting. But before she could respond, a chilling cry erupted from the floor. "He's not breathing anymore," Margaret wailed, clutching her husband's body as he convulsed one final time. In that instant, all barriers collapsed. Nathan surged forward, pushing Karen gently aside, dropping to his knees beside Richard. His strong hands pressed against the man's chest, launching a desperate battle with death. Richard Lewis lay motionless, his large frame sprawled across the aisle. His once healthy complexion had drained to an ashen gray, tinged with blue. His lips quivered briefly before stiffening. Time seemed to halt, but in Dr. Nathan Carter's eyes, every second fell like the hammer of death. He pressed 2 fingers to Richard's neck. No pulse. Not a single beat. That heart had stopped. "Cardiac arrest!" Nathan roared, his voice sharp as steel. "I need space, now!" Margaret's scream tore through the cabin, her tears spilling as her trembling hands clutched her husband's arm. "Richard, please don't leave me. Don't leave me." But instead of order, suspicion rippled through the air. Karen Whitfield, still reeling from being pushed aside, clung to the authority she believed was absolute. "Sir, stop what you're doing immediately. You cannot touch the passenger without proper clearance." Nathan didn't look up. His hands locked together and pressed firmly onto Richard's chest, beginning forceful compressions. The crack of breaking ribs echoed, drawing gasps of horror. But Nathan didn't falter. "Broken ribs mean nothing. Oxygen means life," he muttered, as much to himself as to everyone listening. Karen stepped forward, her voice rigid, laced with anger and fear. "You're not authorized. If you continue, I'll call the captain and have you restrained." The cabin thickened with tension, transformed into a battlefield between life and death. But Nathan was no longer alone. Isabella Cruz, an emergency nurse from Miami, leapt to her feet. Her sun-weathered face was firm, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm a trauma nurse. He knows exactly what he's doing. That man will die if we wait for your procedure." Karen spun on her, snapping, "Sit down, ma'am. This is protocol." But another voice rang out from seat 5C. Robert Miller, 60.1, a retired paramedic, moved forward with steady steps. I've done this job nearly 3 decades. I know a real doctor when I see one. He's the real deal. The cabin erupted into murmurs. She's right. Let the doctor work. No, rules are rules. Anyone could fake it. But look at him. He's saving that Tat man. Margaret, drowning in despair, fell to her knees, clasping her hands like a prayer. Please, someone, anyone, let him live. Meanwhile, Nathan's compressions continued, each one deliberate, his eyes locked on Richard. He barked commands in short, precise bursts. Airway, clear it! Find the AED, now! Count. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Isabella sprang into action, tilting Richard's head back to open the airway. Robert took his position, ready to assist with breathing. Together, the 3 transformed the aisle into a makeshift emergency room. But Karen still refused to yield. She turned to nearby passengers, her voice cracking with a mix of anger and fear of being wrong. He's not a real doctor. He could kill him. So suddenly, a woman in a navy suit stood, phone raised, capturing everything. Sophia Bennett, 40. 2, a powerful attorney from Seattle, spoke sharply. What you're doing is obstruction of emergency care. This is negligence. No, this is criminal. Karen froze. A flicker of fear flashed in her blue eyes, yet she clung to control. I'm in charge here. Then take responsibility for a man's death. Sophia's reply sliced like ice. The cabin held its breath, every gaze fixed on Karen, the barrier between life and death. Just then, a young man rushed forward, clutching the AED. Diego Morales, 27, a medical student, shouted, I've got the defibrillator. Nathan's eyes blazed. Good. Open it. Pads on the chest. Hurry. Karen stepped back. Control slipped through her fingers. The cabin no longer followed her. All focus was on Nathan. Diego tore open the case. Isabella pressed the pads onto Richard's chest. The device's voice rang out. Analyzing rhythm, shock advised. Clear, Nathan barked. Everyone pulled back. A jolt surged through Richard's body, lifting him off the floor before it fell limp again. The air was suffocating. Margaret broke into sobs. Karen gripped the nearest seat armrest, her face pale. Nathan resumed compressions immediately, his voice pounding with each thrust. 1, 2, 3, 4. Suddenly, Evelyn Parker, 70 years old, stood from her seat. Her voice was hoarse, but rang like a bell of truth. I've had black doctors all my life. Some of the best care I've ever received. Why do you assume he isn't real? Her words ripped through the cabin's veil. Karen staggered, her eyes trembling as realization struck. This wasn't about protocol. It wasn't about procedure. It was prejudice. At that moment, Richard let out a faint, rattling breath. Nathan pressed his fingers to his neck. A pulse, weak but steady. Pulse! Nathan shouted, his eyes alight. Weak, but it's there. The cabin erupted in cheers and tears. Margaret sobbed in disbelief. But Nathan didn't stop. His voice remained urgent, commanding. He's not safe yet. He could crash any second. Keep the AED ready. Oxygen, now! Karen slumped into the flight attendant's seat, her hands covering her face. The truth cut deep. She had nearly cost a man his life, because she refused to trust her own eyes. The plane continued to slice through the deep blue sky, but inside first class, time felt shattered. Passengers who had once been seated in luxury leather chairs were no longer spectators of privilege, but unwilling witnesses to a battle for life itself. Dr. Nathan Carter pressed his hands firmly against Richard Lewis's chest, arms locked straight, channeling his entire weight into each compression. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, yet his rhythm stayed strong, steady, and unhesitating. 30 compressions. Now give 2 breaths, Nathan commanded, his eyes never leaving the patient. Isabella Cruz moved swiftly, pressing the mask to Richard's face and delivering breaths into his lungs. A faint hiss, a fragile rise of his chest. It was a tenuous sign, but enough to kindle hope. Beside her, Robert Miller held the airway steady, tilting the head and keeping the jaw open with practiced precision. Diego Morales, the young medical student, his hands trembling yet his eyes resolute, checked the AED and shouted, "AED is ready, doctor." "Good. Stand by. We may need another shock any second," Nathan answered firmly. Meanwhile, at the back, attorney Sophia Bennett kept her phone raised, recording every second. She wasn't just capturing an emergency, she was documenting proof. The proof of how a man nearly died because of prejudice and obstruction. Margaret Lewis knelt beside her husband, clutching his hand, her voice breaking through sobs. "Richard, please, you promised to take me to our granddaughter's recital next week. Please don't break that promise." Her words sliced into the hearts of everyone who heard them. A man of immense power, once in command of billion-dollar deals, now lay helpless, his fate hanging by a thread. All because precious minutes had been lost. Karen Whitfield, the lead flight attendant, stood frozen in the corner, her face pale. The confidence that had always been her sword, the weapon she used to assert authority, had crumbled into visible fear. A voice inside her whispered relentlessly, "Was I wrong?" But instead of yielding, Karen clung desperately to what she called procedure. Her voice wavered, thin and brittle. We have to wait for confirmation. Protocol says." Sophia cut in immediately, her voice sharp and unyielding. "Protocol doesn't mean letting a man die in front of us. What you did wasn't safety. It was prejudice. And it's on video." Karen fell silent. The cabin held its breath. At that instant, the AED emitted a sharp beep. "Analyzing rhythm. No shock advised. Continue CPR." Nathan resumed compressions without hesitation, sweat dripping down onto his dark shirt. Under his fingers, he felt the faint stir of a pulse, fragile as a bird trembling in a storm. "Pulse present, but weak," he announced, his tone clipped and precise. "We need oxygen immediately." Raul Diaz, a young flight attendant, rushed forward with an oxygen tank. Nathan quickly attached the mask and adjusted the flow. Richard inhaled, a raspy, ragged sound, but breath nonetheless. The bluish tint around his lips began to fade slightly. Isabella's face lit up. "He's responding." But Nathan shook his head, his eyes hard. "He's still critical. He could crash again any moment." The cabin seemed to dangle on a thread, stretched between despair and hope. In a nearby row, a middle-aged man, Martin Hayes, voice trembling, spoke aloud. I thought he wasn't a doctor. I admit it. I looked at him and doubted. But seeing this, my God, I was wrong. His confession was like a mirror, reflecting silent admissions from countless others who lowered their eyes in shame. Karen gripped the edge of a seat, her heart pounding wildly. The protests, the stares, the accusations, all hammered against her pride. Yet deep inside, she knew the harsher truth. She had stood in the way of salvation simply because she didn't believe someone like Nathan could truly be a doctor. Suddenly, Richard's body shuddered violently. His eyes fluttered open for a fleeting moment, glazed and unfocused. Margaret cried out, clutching his hand tighter. "Richard, can you hear me?" Nathan leaned close, his voice calm yet commanding. "Mr. Lewis, you're on an airplane. You had a heart attack. We're helping you. Stay still. Don't fight it." Richard's lips moved soundlessly, but in his clouded eyes there was recognition. He had heard. He had understood. Margaret wept again, but this time her tears carried hope. Nathan turned to the team around him. "Keep monitoring vitals. Prepare for rearrest. Call the cockpit. Tell the captain we need an emergency landing at Denver." Raoul nodded and hurried away. Meanwhile, Karen quietly stepped back toward the rear of the cabin, her body trembling. Her authority, her pride, the protocols she had always believed in, now revealed to be meaningless. She whispered to herself, almost inaudible, "What have I done?" No one answered. The entire first-class cabin now followed a new leader, not the flight attendant in uniform, but the doctor who had been doubted, stopped, judged. And he had shattered the prejudice with action. The fight for life was not over. But from this moment on, every eye in the cabin saw him differently. The man they once questioned was no longer a stranger. He was their only savior in the sky. The engines roared steadily, but inside first class the air felt compressed, heavy to the point of suffocation. Passengers sat frozen, eyes fixed toward the front, where Dr. Nathan Carter and his team were locked in a desperate struggle with death itself. In the cockpit, the emergency message had been sent. Flight 427 was diverting to Denver. It was a decision never made lightly, but with a life balanced on the knife edge of survival, no captain dared to hesitate. From the overhead speakers, the captain's voice rang out, urgent yet calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are diverting to Denver International Airport for a medical emergency. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your cooperation." A wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. A few frowned, worried about the delay, but most stayed silent, understanding they were witnessing something far more important than any schedule. A fight for life. In the aisle, Nathan bent low over Richard Lewis, pumping his chest, sweat tracing down his face. He rotated with Isabella, giving sharp commands. "Rotate compressions every 2 minutes. Keep oxygen flow at high. Monitor saturation." Isabella answered swiftly, gripping the oxygen mask tight, her eyes locked. Robert secured the airway, while Diego stared at the AED monitor, ready to deliver another shock at any second. Margaret Lewis clutched her husband's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yet in her eyes now flickered a fragile belief. Richard had not been left behind. The young man in the simple shirt, The one she too had doubted at first was now the lifeline holding her husband back from the abyss. At the rear of the cabin, Karen Whitfield had collapsed into her crew seat, her trembling hands covering her face. Her body flushed hot and cold, ears ringing with accusations and the weight of every condemning glance. "What have I done?" The voice in her head screamed. "I stopped a doctor. Had I saved him from a fraud or pushed him closer to death?" Images replayed in her mind like a cursed reel. Richard convulsing, Margaret's cries, Nathan rushing forward. She remembered years ago when an imposter posing as a doctor caused disaster. That incident had carved fear so deep it turned her into a slave to procedure. But now the truth was undeniable. She was no longer protecting anyone. She had nearly stolen a man's life. A voice snapped Karen back to the present. Sophia Bennett, the lawyer, stood nearby, her gaze cutting like a blade. "You almost killed him. Not because of procedure, because of your prejudice." Karen lifted her head, lips trembling. She wanted to defend herself, to protest, but the words stuck in her throat. Because deep inside, one cruel truth was clawing at her. If that man had been a white doctor with silver hair, would I have stopped him? While Karen drowned in guilt, at the front a fragile miracle was unfolding. Nathan pressed his fingers to Richard's neck and felt it, a faint pulse. "Pulse faint but present," he announced, his voice carrying through the cabin. Margaret sobbed, clutching Nathan's arm. "Thank you, Doctor. Please don't let him go." Nathan only gave a curt nod, his eyes sharp as steel. In this moment, he wasn't just a passenger. He was the commander of the fight, controlling every heartbeat, every breath, every decision between life and death. Diego's voice trembled. "Doctor, should we prep for another shock?" "Stay ready," Nathan replied. "But don't shock unless rhythm deteriorates. Keep airway clear. Increase oxygen flow." Each order shot out like an arrow, swift, precise, undeniable. Around them, passengers sat in utter silence, watching as though they were students in a life and death classroom suspended in the sky. In their eyes, power had shifted. The woman in the crisp navy uniform, once the symbol of order, now sat bowed in silence. And the man once doubted, once blocked, was the only pillar holding back death. A passenger whispered, just loud enough for many to hear, "He doesn't just look like a doctor. He is the doctor." The words landed like a verdict. No further proof was needed. Everyone had seen it with their own eyes. At the rear, Karen clenched her hands, her chest heavy with collapse. Her authority was gone, not because Nathan had taken it, but because she had surrendered it the moment she let prejudice guide her. The captain's voice echoed again over the speakers. "Prepare for descent. We will land in Denver in 20 minutes. Medical team is on standby." The cabin trembled lightly as the plane began to descend. Passengers held their breath, not for the turbulence, but for fear that each jolt might pull Richard away forever. Nathan kept compressions steady, eyes fixed on the AED screen. He knew 15 minutes could stretch into eternity. One mistake, and the fragile heart beneath his hands would stop. But there was no hesitation in his gaze. In that life or death moment, he remembered his daughter's words. "Daddy fixes broken hearts." and in his mind he vowed, "No one, no prejudice, will ever stop me from doing that." The thunderous roar shook the cabin as the landing gear deployed, the entire aircraft shuddering violently. First class was wound tight as a string, every passenger holding their breath, eyes locked on Richard Lewis, the man still lying motionless in the aisle. Dr. Nathan Carter leaned over him, his hands never once stopping compressions. He counted rhythmically, eyes flicking to the oxygen monitor clipped to Richard's finger. The numbers flickered, wavering between life and death. "Stay with me. Come on." "Stay," Nathan muttered, his voice both command and prayer. Margaret knelt beside her husband, her hand gripping his tightly, tears soaking the hem of her dress. In her eyes swirled an ocean of despair and hope. The beeping of the AED, the relentless counting, the ragged breaths escaping Richard's throat, all of it merged with the roar of the engines into a symphony of life and death. Then the decisive moment came. The wheels slammed onto the runway, the fuselage jolting hard. Passengers let out scattered gasps of relief, but in first class, no one celebrated. Every eye remained fixed on Nathan. The aircraft slowed, banking sharply, then rolled steadily toward the emergency gate. Outside, the red and blue lights of ambulances flashed. Denver was ready for the storm that had just fallen from the sky. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated. Medical team will board immediately," the captain's voice announced. Seconds later, the cabin door burst open and 4 medics in Navy uniforms rushed in, their eyes sharp as they swept the scene. "Status," the team leader barked. Nathan looked up, his voice urgent but precise. "Male, 64, cardiac arrest. Initial V-fib. 3 shocks delivered, weak pulse regained. Oxygen saturation unstable. Possible pulmonary edema. He's critical." The medics exchanged glances, then looked back at Nathan, respect plain in their eyes. One gave a quick nod. "You're a physician?" "Dr. Nathan Carter, Chief of Cardiology, San Francisco General." There was no boasting in his tone, only plain truth. But the truth struck like lightning, leaving the entire cabin stunned. Margaret broke down, crying out, "He saved my husband. He's the reason Richard is still alive." The atmosphere shifted sharply. Passengers began to whisper, then speak out. "She stopped him at first. The flight attendant blocked him. She said he wasn't a real doctor." Every gaze snapped toward Karen Whitfield. She stood frozen at the back of the cabin, her face ghostly pale, lips trembling. In an instant, the woman once seen as the enforcer of order and discipline had become the defendant in a public trial held by every witness in that cabin. Sophia Bennett stepped forward, her voice cold as steel, phone still raised high. "I have everything recorded. From the moment Dr. Sotter stood up until now, you tried to stop him. You almost cost this man his life. This is evidence." Karen staggered back a step, her hand clutching the seat. I was following protocol." Her voice shrank, drained of authority. "Protocol?" Robert Miller roared. "I've been an EMT for 28 years. Protocol never means letting a man die in front of you." Another passenger, the man who had once defended Karen, lowered his head. "I was wrong. I thought she was right to be cautious. But after seeing what Dr. Carter did, I was dead wrong. He saved him." Murmurs swept the cabin, each word another dagger twisting deeper into Karen. The medics lifted Richard onto a stretcher, working swiftly as they listened. Their leader looked up, voice sharp. "Who prevented this physician from acting?" Instantly, passengers pointed in unison. No words were needed. Karen Whitfield was nailed in place by the judgment of every eye in the room. An elderly woman, Evelyn Parker, spoke slowly, her voice gravelly but resonant. "You didn't see a doctor because you didn't want to see one. That prejudice nearly killed him." Karen collapsed against a seat back, her body trembling. Meanwhile, Nathan never turned, never engaged in the accusations. He walked alongside the stretcher, eyes fixed on Richard, one hand steadying the oxygen tank. For him, nothing mattered more than keeping that heart beating. The aircraft door swung open, ambulance lights pouring into the cabin. The stretcher was lifted, the medics surged forward. Margaret followed, sobbing, whispering thanks to Nathan with every step. Behind them, silence fell over first class. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of realization. They had witnessed the naked truth. Prejudice could kill. And the man, once underestimated, had risen, flipped the script, and saved a life in front of them all. Karen slumped into her jump seat, her hands clutching her head. In the fading echoes of footsteps, she whispered, her voice broken and barely audible to herself. "What have I done?" Denver International Airport glowed with flashing red and blue lights, sirens wailing into the night. As the aircraft door opened, the stretcher was rushed down the jet bridge, surrounded by the emergency medical team. Dr. Nathan Carter ran alongside, one hand steadying the oxygen tank, the other on Richard Lewis's pulse. His eyes were sharp, never leaving the patient. Sweat streaked across his forehead, but his voice was steady and commanding. "Pulse irregular. Oxygen saturation 70.8%. Prepare for intubation if necessary." The team leader, ER physician Dr. Sarah Lindstrom, gave a quick nod. "Understood. We'll stabilize en route. Doctor, you're riding with us?" Nathan answered curtly. "Yes. Continuity matters." Margaret Lewis, eyes swollen from tears, clung to her husband's hand as she stumbled beside the stretcher. "Don't leave me, Richard. Not now. Not ever." The siren screamed as the ambulance sped away, its lights tearing through the night. Back in first class, silence hung heavy. Passengers sat frozen, some still clutching their phones, quietly recording. They knew what they had just witnessed. Nearly a crime born from prejudice. Karen Whitfield slumped in her jump seat, her eyes empty, hands clenched white against her knees. Every sound replayed in her mind, the cries, the silence, the looks of accusation, trapping her in a loop she could not escape. Then the door opened again. This time it was not medics, but three figures in uniform, two police officers and a woman in a black suit with her hair tied in a tight bun, walking with authority. Her voice cut through the cabin, calm yet commanding. "I'm Special Agent Natalia Ramirez, FBI Civil Rights Division. We've received reports of obstruction of emergency medical care on this flight. We'll need to take immediate statements." The cabin seemed to tremble. Passengers rose, voices colliding. "I saw it. She blocked him." "She said he wasn't a real doctor." Sophia Bennett stepped forward, phone still recording. "I'm an attorney. I have the entire incident on video." from the very first confrontation to the handoff to medical personnel. This is clear evidence. Agent Ramirez gave a sharp nod, her eyes cutting toward Karen. "Ms. Whitfield, we need to speak with you immediately." Karen staggered to her feet, lips trembling. I was only following procedure." A contemptuous laugh came from the back row. Robert Miller, the retired EMT, rose to his feet, his voice booming. "Procedure never means letting a man die when help is right in front of you. That wasn't procedure. That was prejudice." Murmurs of agreement surged. Passengers nodded, pointing, their eyes cold and unrelenting as they bore down on Karen. She clenched her fists, wanting to argue, but her throat locked tight. Deep inside, one truth stabbed at her. They were right. She had not seen a doctor. She had only seen skin color. Agent Ramirez's tone left no space for excuses. "Whitfield, you are being detained for questioning under suspicion of civil rights violation and reckless endangerment. Officers, please escort her." The officers moved in, firm but measured, locking her arms as they led her away. Karen stammered weakly. "I didn't mean... I was afraid." "What if he wasn't?" "Afraid of what?" Evelyn Parker, the elderly woman, rose to her feet. Her voice trembled but carried through the cabin. "I've been treated by black doctors my whole life. Some of the best care I've ever received. What exactly made you think he wasn't one? His skin?" Karen froze. She wanted to say no, wanted to invent some other excuse, but her mind was empty. Any words would only expose her further. The officers guided her down the aisle. The passengers remained silent, but their eyes pierced her like needles. No forgiveness waited for her here. Inside the ambulance, Nathan stayed at Richard's side. Red and blue lights flickered across his face, drawn tight with focus. "Pressure dropping. He's going into shock," Dr. Lindstrom warned. "IV fluids, wide bore. Keep oxygen high. Prepare amiodarone if V-TAC recurs." Nathan issued commands without hesitation, one hand pressed to Richard's pulse. Margaret sat hunched in the corner, her hands trembling, but her eyes fixed on her husband and the man saving him. Her voice cracked with emotion. "You saved him when no one else believed you. I'll never forget this, Dr. Carter. Never." Nathan gave a brief nod. To him, this was never about belief or doubt. It was about a life, and he would never allow anything, not even prejudice, to stand in the way. The ambulance screeched into the hospital bay, doors swinging open as the hospital team swarmed the stretcher. Nathan never broke stride, following them inside. Behind him, the lights still flashed against the cold tarmac. And somewhere else in the airport, Karen Whitfield, once the unquestioned authority of the cabin, now walked in handcuffs, escorted by law and shadowed by witnesses. An absolute reversal. A reckoning that could not be denied. The emergency doors swung open, and Richard Lewis was rushed straight into the resuscitation room. Footsteps pounded, fluorescent lights blazed, and the sharp sting of antiseptic filled the air. Dr. Nathan Carter followed close beside the stretcher, his voice steady and clear as he delivered every detail. Male, 60, 4. Cardiac arrest in flight. Initial V-fib. 3 shocks delivered. Regained weak pulse, unstable vitals, oxygen saturation fluctuating. Possible pulmonary edema. IV fluids running. amiodarone administered. On-call physicians scribbled notes at lightning speed, nurses passing syringes and equipment from hand to hand. A young doctor whispered under his breath, "God, he should have been gone." Nathan's reply was cold, unyielding. He would have been, if we'd waited for permission. No one asked further. They all dove into their tasks, knowing each second was a razor's edge between life and death. The monitor beeped unevenly, Richard's heartbeat flickering like a candle in the wind. Nathan clenched his jaw, his hands gripping the bed rail, his eyes locked on the screen. "Prep cath lab. He needs angiography now." Dr. Sarah Lindstrom, the ER physician leading the team, nodded firmly. "Agreed. Likely LAD occlusion. We'll alert the surgical team." Outside the glass wall, Margaret gripped the pane so tightly her knuckles turned white, her swollen eyes locked on Nathan. She saw his tall frame, steady, commanding the room. A doctor she had almost lost to a senseless obstruction. Gratitude swelled in her chest, tangled with a deep fury. If he hadn't fought through, Richard would already be gone. In a sterile interview room at Denver International, fluorescent lights revealed every tremor on Karen Whitfield's face. She sat opposite Agent Natalia Ramirez, flanked by 2 officers. On the table, Sophia Bennett's phone was connected to a screen, replaying the damning video, Karen blocking Nathan, her hand pressed against his chest, her voice cold and cutting. "We need a real doctor." Margaret's desperate screams echoed in the recording, the pleas, the silence of a stopped heart. Then Nathan dropping to his knees, dragging Richard back from death. Agent Ramirez stopped the video, her eyes sharp as steel. "Ms. Whitfield, you saw a man collapse. A licensed cardiologist identified himself. Multiple passengers confirmed his expertise, yet you physically obstructed him. Why?" Karen swallowed hard, her voice hoarse. I was protecting the airline. Years ago, a man pretended to be a neurosurgeon and almost killed a passenger. I swore never again." Ramirez's gaze never wavered. "And yet, did you ever question a white male passenger claiming to be a doctor?" Silence fell heavy, dragging the room into a pit. Karen's lips trembled before the words finally broke out. "No." Ramirez wrote a note, each stroke cutting like a verdict into the air. "So your protocol only applies selectively. That is called prejudice. And when prejudice obstructs emergency care, it is a federal crime." Karen's breath came ragged, her shoulders shaking. She clung to one last thread of defense. "I didn't mean for him to die. I didn't think he could be." "Could be what?" Ramirez's voice sliced through, merciless. "A doctor? Because of his skin? Say it, Ms. Whitfield." Karen bowed her head, tears streaming down. But no tears could wash away what was already carved in evidence. In the cath lab, the monitors lit up with the stark image of Richard's heart. A coronary artery was blocked completely, blood flow dammed like a river against stone. 100% LAD occlusion. We need immediate intervention." Dr. Lindstrom's tone was urgent. Nathan nodded sharply. "Get the stent ready. If not possible, prep for Cabby G." He leaned down close to Richard, his voice low but firm. "Stay with me, sir. We're almost there." Richard groaned faintly, his eyes fluttering open. In the haze, recognition flickered. His lips moved weakly. You fought for me. Nathan clasped his hand, squeezing firmly. And I'll keep fighting. Don't let go. Outside the glass, Margaret pressed her hand to her chest as sobs broke free, her heart straining not to shatter. Back in the interview room, Ramirez closed the file with a snap, her voice cutting. Ms. Whitfield, you are officially detained pending full investigation. Charges may include obstruction of emergency medical care, reckless endangerment, and potential civil rights violations. Karen collapsed into her chair, her face ashen. Once a woman who commanded authority in uniform, now nothing but a prisoner shackled by her own prejudice. The door burst open, and an officer reported, "Agent, news networks are already airing passenger videos. It's going viral." Ramirez nodded once, her tone unwavering. Good. Let the truth spread. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. 2 battlefields unfolded. One inside the operating room, where Richard's life dangled by a thread, and one inside the interrogation room, where Karen's truth was stripped bare. Both converged on the same point. The moment prejudice was defeated, one by medicine, the other by justice. In the cold waiting room, the clock ticked relentlessly, each sound striking like an endless drumbeat of dread. Margaret Lewis sat collapsed in a chair, her hands clasped so tightly her nails dug into her skin until it bled. Every closed door was a pull, keeping her from the truth. Was her husband still alive or already gone? Suddenly the door swung open. Dr. Sarah Lindstrom stepped out, her white coat streaked with sweat. Beside her, Dr. Nathan Carter peeled off surgical gloves, his eyes bloodshot yet calm and steady. "Mrs. Lewis," Sarah said, her voice hoarse but clear, "your husband made it through surgery. He's critical but stable. The bypass was successful." Margaret broke into sobs, covering her face with trembling hands, then looked up at Nathan with eyes full of gratitude. "You saved him. If it weren't for you." Nathan shook his head gently, his voice low but firm. "No. We saved him. The team here, the passengers who stepped up. It was everyone." Yet Margaret knew the truth. If Nathan hadn't fought through the obstruction on that plane, there would have been no surgery to speak of. He stepped closer, laying a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Lewis, the next 20. 4 hours are crucial. But he's fighting, and I'll be here until we know he's out of danger." Margaret nodded vigorously, tears still flowing, but this time not from despair. They were tears of hope. While Richard lay in recovery, outside, America was exploding. The videos from first class, Karen blocking the aisle, Nathan shouting, "I'm a cardiologist!" The moment Richard's heart stopped and then jolted back to life with a defibrillator, spread like wildfire. CNN, NBC, Fox News, every outlet broke into special coverage. The screen split, one side showing Nathan bent over performing CPR, the other emblazoned with a headline in red, "Doctor blocked mid, flight due to bias, saves life anyway." The hashtag #excellence has no color trended within hours. Millions of shares, hundreds of thousands of furious comments, calls for an airline investigation. One user wrote, "Imagine losing your husband because someone didn't believe a black man could be a doctor. This has to change." Another posted, Dr. Carter is the reason that man is alive. Hero doesn't even begin to describe him. In the recovery room, Richard Lewis opened his eyes for the first time since surgery. His breath was shallow, his words barely a whisper, but his gaze lit up when he saw Margaret and Nathan beside him. "Richard," Margaret wept, clutching his hand. "You're here. You came back to me." Richard turned his head with effort, searching for Nathan. His voice was faint, almost without sound. "I heard her. She tried to stop you, because of who you are." Nathan clasped his hand firmly, his tone calm. "Don't waste your strength on that, Mr. Lewis. Focus on healing." But Richard squeezed weakly, lips trembling. "Thank you for fighting anyway." Margaret sobbed harder, but this time her cries carried relief. In the interrogation room, Agent Natalia Ramirez closed out Karen Whitfield's session. Every faltering answer, every averted glance was recorded. The woman who once commanded authority as a chief flight attendant was now a suspect facing federal charges. Ramirez stood, her voice cutting through the silence. "This is no longer an internal airline matter. It's now a federal case." Karen dropped her head onto the table, her shoulders shaking. Everything she had built, her career, her reputation, collapsed in one night, undone by a choice rooted in blind prejudice. In the hospital corridor, as Nathan stepped away from the OR, a little girl of about 10 approached, her eyes shining, clutching a sheet of paper. Her mother stood behind her, nodding encouragement. "Excuse me, sir. Are you the doctor from the plane?" the girl asked, her voice quivering with hope. Nathan was momentarily surprised, then smiled. "Yes, I am. What's your name?" "Aaliyah," she said softly, holding out the paper. "Can I have your autograph? I want to be a doctor like you one day." Nathan knelt down, writing slowly. "Future Dr. Aaliyah. Never let anyone tell you who you can't be. Dr. Nathan Carter." The girl's eyes lit up as if she held the whole sky. Her mother whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you, doctor. You didn't just save one man tonight. You gave my daughter a dream." Nathan smiled, though inside a storm churned. He knew the fight on that plane was never just about saving one patient. It was about confronting the darkness of prejudice, the kind that could strangle a dream if no one stood against it. Two fronts, inside the hospital, where Richard fought for every breath, and across social media, where America fought for truth. And at the center of it all, a doctor once doubted, now finally heard by the entire world. At dawn the next morning, the lights burned late on the 40th floor of Transair headquarters in Chicago. Around a long, polished wooden table sat more than a dozen senior executives, their eyes fixed on the video streaming across every news channel. On the screen, Karen Whitfield blocked the aisle, her hand pressed against Nathan's chest as she said coldly, "We need a real doctor." Moments later, Richard Lewis went limp. His heart stopped. Then his body jolted back as Nathan delivered a life-saving shock. Each frame cut into the airline's reputation like a blade. CEO James Matthews, 58, his face hard as stone, slammed his hand on the table. "This is a catastrophe. Not just PR. This is federal liability." Millions have seen this footage. The chief legal officer's voice shook. Sir, the FBI is already involved. If obstruction of emergency medical care with discriminatory motive is proven, we are looking at lawsuits, possibly a class action. Another executive spoke up, fear clear in his tone. Stock is already down 6% overnight. We need a statement. We need control. Matthews inhaled sharply, his voice dropping but steely. No. What we need is accountability. Find Dr. Nathan Carter. I want to speak with him personally, and suspend Whitfield immediately. Meanwhile, outside the Denver hospital, dozens of reporters crowded the emergency entrance. Cameras pointed, microphones thrust forward, flashes bursting like lightning. Dr. Carter! Over here! Do you believe this was racism? Will you press charges against the airline? Nathan stepped into the hall, wearing a borrowed hospital coat, his eyes sunken from exhaustion. He raised a hand against the glare, but his voice was firm. My focus right now is on my patient, Mr. Lewis. He survived because of teamwork and immediate intervention. But yes, he almost didn't, because prejudice stood in the way. The crowd erupted, scribbling furiously. A live banner on CNN read, "Cardiologist blocked mid, flight speaks out. Prejudice stood in the way." Inside, Margaret Lewis watched through the glass, pride and anguish colliding in her chest. She knew Nathan had not only saved her husband, he had put his career on the line to face a storm of public scrutiny in the name of truth. At the FBI field office in Denver, Agent Natalia Ramirez addressed her team. Video evidence confirms physical obstruction by flight attendant Karen Whitfield. Multiple witnesses corroborate. This wasn't just poor judgment. It was the racial bias in a life or death situation. A colleague interjected. Public pressure is enormous. Civil rights groups are already mobilizing. This case could set national precedent. Ramirez nodded firmly. Then Dr. Carter will be our key witness. His testimony could change more than this trial. It could reshape airline protocol nationwide. In a holding cell, Karen Whitfield sat curled into herself, hands clenched, eyes bloodshot. Her court, appointed attorney, exhaled heavily. They have overwhelming evidence. The best you can do is cooperate, maybe reduce sentencing. Karen's voice cracked. I didn't mean to, I just thought... Thought what? The lawyer snapped wearily. That he didn't look like a doctor? That excuse won't hold, Ms. Whitfield. Not when a man nearly died and the world saw why. Karen dropped her head, crushed beneath the realization. This was no longer about losing a job. It was society's verdict on the prejudice she had carried her entire career. In the recovery ward, Richard Lewis stirred. His voice was raspy, but each word clear. Where is the doctor? Nathan stepped forward, leaning down. I'm here. You made it through surgery. You're stable. Richard locked eyes with him, his gaze heavy but resolute. I heard everything on that plane. She tried to stop you because you were black. I won't stay silent about that. If I'm alive today, it's because you refuse to back down. Margaret sobbed, clutching her husband's hand. Nathan placed a steady hand on Richard's shoulder, his tone calm but unyielding. Rest now. There will be time for all of that later. Right now, your job is to heal. But deep inside, Nathan knew the words Richard had spoken would echo far beyond any operating room. Online, the hashtags surged. Let doctors save lives. Excellence has no color. Medical associations issued formal statements demanding reform of airline protocols. An evening broadcast declared, "This case may lead to federal legislation protecting medical professionals from discriminatory obstruction during emergencies." Nathan sat alone in the hospital, gazing out at the Denver skyline, lights glittering against the night. He exhaled slowly, knowing he had become an unwilling symbol. He had never sought the spotlight, but this time the spotlight had found him, and he understood. Not only had Richard's life been saved, but a chance had emerged to protect countless others from the stranglehold of prejudice. 6 months after the incident on Flight 427, the federal courtroom in Denver was packed. Dozens of live cameras lined the aisles. Hundreds of spectators filled the benches. This was not merely a trial of a flight attendant. It was a judgment on an entire system forced into the harsh light of truth. Karen Whitfield sat at the defendant's table. The Navy uniform that had once been her pride was replaced by a gray prison jumpsuit, shrinking her into a shadow of herself. Her eyes were sunken, her hair disheveled, her frail hands twisted together. Witnesses took the stand one by one. Margaret Lewis spoke through tears of the moment she watched her husband's breath stop. Robert Miller, a retired EMT, testified firmly. Dr. Carter knew exactly what he was doing. He's the reason Mr. Lewis is alive. Attorney Sophia Bennett played the video in full before the jury. The cold words rang out. "We need a real doctor." The courtroom fell silent. There was no denying it. Finally, Dr. Nathan Carter stepped forward. His gaze was steady, his voice deep and resolute. "I did what any physician would do. But the difference is, I had to fight for the right to do it. Prejudice almost killed my patient. That must never happen again." When the jury returned, the room held its breath. The foreperson read aloud, "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." Karen closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. There was no room left for excuses. The judge pronounced sentence. 4 years in federal prison with 3 years supervised release. Let this case stand as a warning. Authority is never a license for prejudice. Murmurs rippled across the room. The verdict was not just for one individual, but for the prejudices embedded deep within society. Immediately after, the U.S. Department of Transportation announced sweeping reform, the Carter Protocol. The new mandate applied across the aviation industry. When a passenger identified themselves as a medical professional in an emergency, they would be permitted to intervene immediately. Verification of credentials would happen in parallel, never as a prerequisite. Any obstruction born of prejudice would be treated as a federal violation. The press release closed with bold words, "Minutes matter. Expertise saves lives. Prejudice has no place at 37,000 feet." Other airlines quickly followed. Within a year, nearly all international carriers adopted similar policies. Richard Lewis, after months of recovery and cardiac therapy, appeared with his wife at a press conference. He was thinner, his steps slow, but his eyes clear and his voice firm. "I am alive because one man refused to be dismissed. I heard everything that night. I know why my care was delayed. Prejudice almost killed me. That's the truth." Margaret gripped his hand tightly and added, "We've created the Lewis Foundation for Medical Equity. No family should ever endure what we did. We will fund scholarships, training, and research so that every doctor can do their job without first fighting bias." The room rose in thunderous applause. Dr. Nathan Carter never sought fame. He returned to San Francisco General, taking his shifts, mending broken hearts. But everywhere his name was spoken. At medical conferences, students stood in ovation when he entered. On social media, the image of him kneeling in a narrow airplane aisle circulated endlessly, tied to the words, "Excellence has no color." One evening, when Nathan returned home, his 9-year-old daughter Zoe ran up with a drawing from school. It showed him performing chest compressions, with childlike handwriting scrawled beside it. "My daddy fixes broken hearts. He's my hero." Nathan pulled her close, eyes stinging. He knew his true legacy was not in the glare of the media, but in the seeds of hope planted in the next generation. The trial ended. The verdict was delivered. The new protocol was born. But the story did not end there. It became a symbol, a reminder that prejudice can kill, but courage, skill, and resolve can save lives and reshape the world. At 37,000 feet, a heart had stopped and then beat again. And from that moment, a new law, a new awareness, a new chapter of justice was born. The Carter Protocol, proof that when truth and medical duty are protected, they can soar higher than any prejudice. On Flight 427, a heart stopped beating. And in the moment when prejudice nearly claimed a life, we witnessed something far greater: the power of resolve and expertise. Dr. Nathan Carter did more than save Richard Lewis. He forced an entire time through history to change, and he compelled society to confront the truth that prejudice does not merely wound, it can kill. Karen Whitfield paid with a harsh sentence. But the greater judgment was the awakening of us all. Millions watched the video, thousands of articles were written, and from the ashes of that mistake, the Carter Protocol was born to ensure that any doctor, regardless of race, gender, or appearance, can act to save lives when every second means the difference between life and death. Richard Lewis lives. Margaret still has her husband. Their grandchildren still have their grandfather. And the world has gained one more symbol that excellence has no color. Remember this story, because sometimes we do not know when life will place us in a position where we must choose to believe in prejudice or to believe in humanity. If you believe that justice must be defended, if you believe that truth can change an entire system, then hit like, share, and subscribe. Because only together can we continue telling stories that leave no room for silence in the face of injustice. And now, the question for you, the one watching. If one day you see prejudice standing in the way of someone's life, will you remain silent or will you stand up?